This week's episode of Strange New Worlds was definitely, it was passable, but definitely derivative. But I don't think you're ready to have that discussion yet. If you are, let's talk about it. What's up, my know-it-alls? Okay, it's definitely that time again to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. The episode is Terrarium. It's a Ortegas episode. It does take place on a planet, so that tells me the volume. Closed set, single set roughly, nothing really grandiose. It's definitely the cheaper episode, even if there is an alien presence, because there is a Gorn. Of late, there's been a lot of complaints in the space about Strange New Worlds feeling like they're going constantly back to the well of the original series. And I kind of have to agree for this season so far. Season 1 and 2, I enjoyed immensely. I feel like season 3, while I am enjoying it, by the way, I need to make that abundantly clear. I'm enjoying the episode in the season. I know there's gonna be a ton of people in the comments who are like, the show sucks, the show is this and that. Do me a favor, if you don't have any more to offer than just a single sentence of this show sucks, that's not helpful. I would love to hear why you think it's not as good. But anyway, by the way, the episode is fine. It works. It's functional. It absolutely is. Is it the greatest episode ever of Star Trek? No, probably not. Then you get to the very end, and the very end is what really did it for me, because the very end felt mildly lazy. The whole episode really, in retrospect, feels lazy, but it's not executed poorly, if that makes sense. So last week's episode, I felt like was disjointed, but there were a series of really good and capable scenes that just happened to be thrown together, that there were things I didn't like, and there were things that I did like once I turned my brain off and said, okay, let's just have fun here. And I did have fun with it. This week's episode is extraordinarily functional. It wants to be what it wants to be, which is a Temu version of the arena.
No, I won't kill you. Maybe you thought you were protecting yourself when you attacked the outpost.
But from a different perspective. It's as if someone looked at the episode The Arena, which is the original one with Kirk and the Gorn, and they said, what are the themes and what aspects here? And then let's flip those. Because, spoilers, we get the Metron.
You're a Metron?
Does my appearance surprise you, Captain?
And the Metron is it's funny because if you listen to anything that I do, whether it's Nerd Fights, which by the way, tomorrow night we will talk about this episode, you guys have heard me talk constantly about where's all the supernatural stuff? Where's the fantastical things? Where are all the things that make, where's all that stuff that was very indicative of, bigger species and aliens and the whole 9 yards and this whole fantastical aspect to sci-fi that Star Trek really established, which is this show wants to try to give us what it thinks the original series was. In last week's episode, it was randomness. It was every episode, blah, 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 whatever else. When it's not doing that, because it thinks that's what episodic TV is, it's doing this, giving us familiar things in new settings. The problem is we all have long memories. The problem is, as the big promo that they dropped, Star Trek Lives Here on Paramount, is that Star Trek lives there on Paramount. We've seen the episodes. We know the lore. We know the history. So for you to sit here and try to build a brand new lore or a brand new history from the old, you're also a slave to where you've placed the series. Okay, let's get into the short and skinny of this before I get too far off base. Ortegas is sent to maneuver around some gravimetric whatevers just as she's about to finish doing that, because it's funny, the minute they were like, oh, well, it's gravimetric forces that are coming from unknown origin. I was like, oh, well, clearly that's going to be some sort of a rift or a wormhole or something. And sure enough, it was a wormhole because, we're Star Trek fans. We know what we're talking about. When she gets sucked in and she crashes on this planet, and you have two storylines happening, then you have hers on the planet dealing with what she's dealing with, which is survival first, followed by the discovery that there's actually a downed Gorn there, and she has to try to help them as well. So, communicate with them, okay? But then you also have what's happening over on the ship, which is Uhura is very much trying to help locate and track down where Ortegas ended up, And she's trying to convince everybody, and you have everyone feeling very solemn and sorrowful about it. But at the end of the day, it really becomes about what Uhura is willing to sacrifice to make sure that her friend comes home. And I guess that becomes the less important storyline, because obviously the main storyline is Ortegas on the planet, and Ortegas on this planetoid where she crashes. She manages to make water, but then she ends up tracking this, she finds a shelter of some sort. The shelter is controlled by a Gorn, and the Gorn uses her as a bait to catch something, and then ultimately offers her food. And so it's this whole back and forth. It's enemy mine. It's enemy mine all day. The Dennis Quaid movie from I believe it was the 80s, okay? And which is, we've seen this story 1,000 times, whether it's Star Trek or anywhere else. We've seen the trope of the enemy is who has to work together to survive some unsurmountable situation or whatever. So seeing that story rehashed in general, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe they'll do something original with it. Having it be the enemy she's had to deal with in her trauma, while not exactly a part of the trope, equally felt contrived. And her getting over it in the whole 9 yards and how they eventually survive and the whole bit also felt contrived, even though it made sense, but at the same time it didn't, you know? And it felt very surface, mainly because, again, I've seen the same story done better elsewhere. And even though it's considered a B movie, I think Enemy Mine is one of the best versions of this from a sci-fi standpoint, sci-fi position that you can imagine. The relationship that they develop between Ortegas and the Gorn is, while contrived, I like how they develop it, and having the threat of the monster creatures that the Gorn uses for food and everything else is interesting. And then ultimately culminating in the climax where Ortegas has the crazy harebrained idea. And of course they add tension, the wormhole's gonna close and they have to use a shell of some, these solutions felt very the next generation. So they felt very technobabble-ish adjacent. And again, all falling under, this is not what the original series was about. And it's fine, or whatever. I didn't hate the episode. In execution, the episode is fine. I just didn't like the fact that it's a rehashed theme. But, and I know that there's no original stories under the sun, so what are you expecting? I don't know, I expect some version of an original take on this if you're gonna do it. I feel like if you were to get into a Star Trek writer's room and you were to put on a writer's board all the different types of episodes that exist out there, you'd have a pretty significant list of just types. Then it just becomes, well, what did the others do? And I don't necessarily wanna do that, but I wanna do what does my version of that kind of episode look like? The problem is, I think this is the answer for at least these writers, who clearly aren't up to the task of doing what they're doing right now. And I don't know if they've changed a lot of the writers in the writer's room. I don't know what's happened, because again, season 1 I thought was excellent. Season 2 I thought was really good as well. But this season is starting to feel sloppy. Again, not an execution, which it shouldn't. These shows are pretty much, will make themselves, regardless of who's in the director's chair most of the time, because you've sort of built a shorthand about how this stuff gets done. Yeah, I'm just kind of ranting at this point because, I don't know, it's more of a rambling review, I suppose. Everybody's acting fine. Like I have no major criticisms other than the fact that it's not a very original story. I don't necessarily know that I like the Metron usage because it feels McGuffin-y. It feels, when everything froze, I thought it was going to be interesting. Here's the other thing. It didn't have to be the Metrons. The Metrons are the ones, by the way, let me backtrack for all you playing at home. The Metrons are the creatures who brought Kirk and the Gorn to the planet that was originally the episode Arena. And at the very end, when Kirk gives mercy, they show up and they say, hey, we don't think you're ready for us yet. And that's essentially what they do here. And they even go so far as to say, we're going to erase your memory of us, and we may very well erase your memory of the Gorn, of how you see the Gorn in general. I interpreted that to mean how they're talking to like how humans perceive the Gorn. Once they came up with the idea to use the Gorn as a primary antagonist, so for instance, the Klingons were the antagonists primarily in the original series, Romulans primarily in the Next Generation, and now we have we have the Gorn in Strange New Worlds. And I feel like that decision, no one thought about, well, someday we're gonna have to correct this. So now you're tripping all over your feet, or it was hand waved away. Oh yeah, no, we'll write it out, we'll fix it, whatever else. Expecting that your writer's gonna be worth a damn to be able to fix the problem. So now you're stuck trying, so now it feels feels like we're in a we have to fix it scenario. The original Metron in the original series rather, was sort of blonde, sort of Greek looking. They've gone for much more alien. This Metron reminded me of a species you might have seen in Farscape or something. The voice work was great in terms of the echoiness of it all, but I feel like they should have just married the look and had somebody with a blonde bob on do the thing. That's just my thought. But that's a personal preference. But yeah, so there you go. Now you know. If no one have to battle, you have to know it all yourself. Do me a favor, comment below. Let me know what you guys think of the episode. Let me know your criticisms, but genuinely, like actually explain for me your criticisms, because I'm starting to go there with you. The episode is tired. So what's the nodal index for this week's episode? It's a tired trope. It's a tired trope that I feel like has been executed better, and as a result, I know that I say not to judge these things on any merit but its own. The problem is when you so blatantly and clearly have had this exact same story done better. Not just elsewhere, but in Star Trek. And I'm not even talking about the arena until you bring the Metrons in. Anyway, yeah, so as a result of that, I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10. Comment below. Let me know what you thought. Are you in? Were you down? Were you tired of this trope as well? Or did you love the episode? And if you loved it, by the way, likewise, tell me all the things you loved about it, because I really want to love this with you. I do, and I'm enjoying sort of the journey that we're going on, sort of discovering these highs and lows that Strange New Worlds has to offer, especially as we barrel toward eventually season 4, and then the final season 5. And I feel like especially when you look down the barrel of things like the puppet episode coming next season. Which, by the way, doesn't scare me compared to just seeing bad episodes like today's. So, all right, guys, I'll talk to you again real soon. Never forget, everyone loves a million. Bye, guys.